Hey guys, and welcome back to the show. I am your host, Megan Hardy, and I am joined today by a very special guest, Christina Hathaway. Christina is a licensed marriage and family therapist with specialized training in food and body obsession. She's a certified fitness and nutrition coach and helps women master their mindset, optimize their health, and strengthen their relationships so they can lead with confidence, clarity, and balance.
Yes.
Boom. So good.
Boom.
So good. And I am so excited for this conversation today. Christina, thank you for being here and welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here as well and have this conversation.
Yes, absolutely. And today we're going to be talking about toxic relationships, relationship codependency, and emotional eating, you guys. So buckle up. It's going to be a good one.
Yes.
But before we jump in, would you just share with everyone like a little bit more about you and your background?
Absolutely. My background in my education is, as you mentioned, I have a master's degree in marriage and family therapy from Arizona State University. But prior to that, I was I have a bachelor's in psychology, but I've been a dancer since I was age 3. I've danced my entire life. And then I was a college cheerleader for 2 years and then also danced in college for a year. So I've always been very active, but also been in industries where your body, right, was very much like picked apart and it was always on display. So when I just went into my graduate program, I had a professor who was a therapist in eating disorder. Uh, I believe it was an outpatient facility that she was doing at the time. I was like, oh, that's interesting because I had experience with my own body dysmorphia and body image, but then also witnessing my friends actively be in eating disorders. I would say I'm more disordered eating than anything else or have been in the past. So I was like, this really resonates with me. However, when it comes to, our behaviors and what I call our solutions to what we'll talk about are the actual problems, restricting food or binging on food is something much deeper than just eat more or eat less. And what I realized is that a lot of this all stems from our own childhood trauma and codependency. And codependency, for those who don't know what it is really just seeking our worth through external validation, whether that's in relationships, whether that's through how we look, whether that is through even things like food, obviously alcohol, sex, gambling, shopping, like it's using these things to make us feel a sense of calmness, connection to self, but they're all outside of us. And we're finding this worth through things that have nothing to do with who we are and our connection to us. So I also did a lot of training in trauma. I have specific training in what's called post-induction therapy, which is a codependency model out of the Meadows, which a lot of people might know that facility because if you watch reality TV, which I do, the girl who was involved in the Scandival, she went to the Meadows. Tiger Woods went to the Meadows. I believe Demi Lovato, like all of the people go to the Meadows because it's all based in the codependency model. But since then have done significant trauma work in regards to my training and myself, which is a big part of my story. And my training, just to add on to it, I'm trained in EMDR, which is eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, which helps to process past trauma using both hemispheres of the brain. And more recently, I've connected to internal family systems, which is a system that explains that we have these different parts. So, as I mentioned, we have these solutions, which oftentimes in this industry, the solutions are actually the thing we're trying to fix, but we don't
Mm,
realize why binge eating is there. Why is it there in the first place? What problem is it trying to be to provide something for or avoid something for in the
mm,
person? And so I have uh, in 2010, I began in the fitness industry and did some like group fit, got into personal training, got into nutrition coaching, left therapy altogether because I had my own kind of mental breakdown. And I went into a job that was nothing to do with my degree and went into sales and I crushed sales. I loved it, but I knew
Crushed it.
that with all this training and this connection that I have to people and the ability to help people put the puzzle pieces together around why they do the things that they quote unquote don't want to do or they hate about themselves. I know I have this, I'll call it gift of connecting and helping people with that. And I said, look, therapy for me isn't the way. I like to have a personal relationship with people. I need to have these specific boundaries because what was happening was I was internalizing a lot of what was going on. And I created the Mindset of Matter, which is my coaching program that is that intersection between psychology, so what goes on in our minds, and biology, how we can move our bodies and change our bodies and feed our bodies. And ultimately, we've been in business since 2019, and we help women, as you mentioned, really create balance in their lives from the inside out.
So good. You
Yeah.
just mic drop, and I'm like, so my people right here, my tribe.
Yay! I know. I'm so big on finding our people because in this industry, I've listened to a couple of your podcasts and we definitely align on things. And in the industry, it's so far from where we've been and it's
Yeah.
not sexy. And so I like to have conversations like this because even on social media, trying to get this message across is much harder than, the clickbait stuff that we see so
Yep.
frequently on
Yep.
social media.
Well, and that's one thing I was just talking with someone else about. On an interview, she was saying, like, we were just talking about how everyone would be fit and healthy and whatever if it wasn't for the mental psychology side
Yes.
of things. Like,
Yes.
that's why it's not easy. Like,
Mm-hmm.
the nutrition, the workouts, that's easy, but it's
Mm-hmm.
not because of the psychology
Yeah.
part of it that comes in. Also, I have to ask you, do you watch, because you said reality TV and you do watch it, do you watch Love is Blind or Married at
Of
First Sight?
I watch Love is Blind. So I have a new podcast I just launched called Dating Deja Vu, which is
Oh,
all
fun.
on relationships. And then I have my podcast, Mindset Mirror Connection, which is the whole health. And I have episodes called Dating Deja Vu, and I pick apart the reality TV and Love is Blind is next now that I've watched everything. I didn't love this season, but I'll
No.
work with it,
No. You don't, well, I'm sure you have you'll pull out plenty to work with, but it was the most boring season
Yes.
ever. It was so
I'm
boring.
like, come on, guys, let's do better.
Let's do
But
better.
it was fun to watch the reunion because they had those episodes or the five top moments, and I was like, see, this is TV. Like, this is
Yeah,
what we
yeah.
want to go back to.
Well, and I feel like the reunion was the juiciest part of the season. I was like, this
Right.
was
Yeah, no, I agree. But yes,
but
I haven't done the other one that you had mentioned, Married at First Sight.
Married
But I
at First
do
Sight.
a lot of Bravo. I'm a
Ah,
Bravo babe. Yeah.
yeah.
So my
Bravo babe.
last deja vu was on Southern Charm, Southern Hospitality, and Summer House couples. So it's
See,
fun.
I've not watched.
Yeah.
Yeah, I might have to go. I'm definitely going to listen to the episodes you release on the Love is Blind to break down
Yes, I
because
will send it to you directly.
it was so
I love it.
good.
Yeah.
So good. Also, Christina Hathaway, no relation to Anne Hathaway.
So funny. My mother-in-law's name is Anne Hathaway, but no, my husband is the Hathaway. I'm actually a Jimenez. As I
Okay.
say, don't panic. I'm Hispanic. But I will tell you, people ask that often, and her father reached out to my husband's uncle because they both were on Ancestry and they were trying to see if there was lineage or whatever, and there wasn't. So
Oh,
we're
I
the
feel like
we're the other Hathaways.
the other Hathaways. But did
The
you
other
ever
way.
run into other like that's the only Hathaway I know is Anne Hathaway. Do you ever run into the other Hathaways?
No.
Okay.
I was trying to think. I think, funny, down in southern Arizona, there's actually a sheriff with that last name.
Okay.
But that was it. And my father-in-law would work down there and he would like get like the 5-star treatment. And he's like, he worked for the county, like to focus on like the he would like assess the land. And yeah, he'd be like, why are they treating me so nice? And then he found out there's a sheriff
The sheriff,
Hathaway.
Sheriff
Yeah.
Hathaway. They know.
Yep. So it's a big deal.
Big deal.
I
So
love my
good.
last name though, because number one, Jimenez is hard to say. Number two, there may or may not have been issues at customs at times with that last name. Now I just cruise. I just
No, I
cruise
cruise.
through. I'm like, nothing to see here.
Nothing to see. No,
It's
I
great.
was a Miller. My main name was Miller, and I was
Mhm.
very excited for going to Hardy,
Mhm.
because that was an upgrade for me because it's a little bit more like less generic than Miller because I'm a Megan Elizabeth Miller. And I was like, Mom and
Mhm.
Dad, how basic white girl do we get? Like Megan Elizabeth Miller.
I
And
like
so
Hardy.
anyway,
It's like Tom
yeah.
Hardy.
It's like it's a step up. It's
Yeah.
a little more original. But anyway, I would love to
Yes.
jump in if you have any direction you want to take first. But first on my list was kind of going more in the direction of the relationship
Yes.
codependency and emotional eating topic.
Yes.
I would love to jump
So, yeah, absolutely. As I mentioned, the eating side of things really is what we call not we, I call a solution to something much deeper. So I want to kind of paint a picture for everyone. If you think about a tree, right? And you have the roots of the tree, you have the trunk of the tree, and then you have the branches. At the roots is trauma. And when people hear trauma, they think war, natural disasters, losing a parent, sexual abuse, physical abuse. And yes, we deal with folks that have, those experiences. That's what we call big T trauma. But little t trauma is much more common. And the way I like to explain little t trauma is when something good should have happened and it didn't. Okay. It wasn't that
in.
something bad happened to you, but something good could have happened to you and it didn't happen to you. So, as an example, you could have had a parent who was in medical school, for example. And that parent obviously is doing that of wanting to provide for the family. But that parent is gone all the time. When they're home, they're, into their work. And as a child, there are needs, and there's a variety of different needs, safety, love and connection, identity, variety, growth that weren't met. Or it could be more obvious where we had a parent who was depressed or suffered with their own addiction or mental health issues. So that parent is already emotionally immature. And we as children who don't know how to navigate emotions, and our parents are the people there to teach us, they don't have the skill. So then we don't learn the skill. So what happens is we learn ways to navigate our lives to provide for one of those needs, whether that's identity, love and connection, safety, and so on. So what that looks like is in the trunk of the tree. So the root of the tree is trauma. Okay. So again, to say it in another way, anything that was less than nurturing to you or anything that shamed you. Okay. And if we put that into perspective, that's literally anything. Like,
Yeah.
it's not what happens to us, it's the story we make up about
Mm.
ourselves because of it. I worked in child crimes for 3 years of my career with the Phoenix Police
Oh,
Department.
wow.
And yes, and people would always ask me, are these kids ruined for life? And I'm like, actually, no. It's very interesting that the kids whose parents believe them, backed
Mm.
them up, kept them safe, got them support, they have a much different experience than unfortunately kids maybe in foster care or the parent is still with the perpetrator or whatever that looks like. That's a totally different story that child's going to make up about
Mm.
themselves. So the trunk of the tree becomes what we call the core symptoms of trauma. And those core symptoms, and I don't like the way they say it. So I'm just going to say these are the things that become out of alignment when we have that root of trauma. Our esteem, how we look at ourselves, our self worth, right? We have two sides of our esteem that these are, if you guys want to think about it as an extreme, you have less than, I'm the problem, and you have better than, they are the problem. Okay. So that's your esteem. Then you have your boundary system. On the side of less than, they're completely boundaryless. On the side of better than, they're walled up. Okay. You have issues with dependency. On the side of less than, we have completely dependent of other people. On the side of better than, we have anti-dependent, or I think they call it needless wantless is what they call it over here.
Mm.
In regards to our ability to talk about our realities, so our wants, our needs, our thoughts, our feelings, on the less than side, they don't trust their reality. They don't
Mm.
they don't even know what that is. They look to everyone else to tell them how to feel. On the better than side, we have controlled reality. We're actually controlling our reality for other people, right? Because we've learned to keep ourselves safe in that way. And then regards to how we moderate ourselves, on the less than side, it's kind of this explosive, kind of extreme way of doing life. And on the better than side, it's very, again, rigid and controlled. So these are kind
Mm.
of these symptoms that come out of that trauma. And so the problem with the two sides is you don't just live on one side or the other.
Mm-hmm.
So for example, I think that I'm not good enough, right? And I say that I get into a relationship. And that's my story. I tell myself I'm always looking at why I'm not good enough. I'm looking for them to see me as not good enough and probably acting towards them in a way that is very insecure. They may do something based on my insecurity, not my not good enoughness. And that will strike me to kind of, like, as I say, swing to the better than side, like F them, that guy sucks, blah, blah, blah. He'll never get anyone better than me, this, that, or even say it to them, right?
Yep.
And that will cause us a lot of shame or fear of abandonment or whatever that is. And then we swing back to the other side. So this swinging happens over and over and over again. And the branches of the tree become the things that we do to stop the swing, emotional
Mm.
eating being one of them, right? So if I have these extreme high emotions, right, and I don't know what to do with them, a nice way or a learned way, because oftentimes we learn that food is very socially acceptable in eating your feelings, I can go to food to stop that swing and kind of numb out. But the problem is that these behaviors become very extreme. And obviously with food, it can cause a lot of damage to our health, right? If we do it in excess or the opposite, if we restrict it. So
Mm.
the cleaner way to explain this is you have these very wounded parts of yourself, aka the trauma, the shame, the guilt, the disappointment. You create behaviors that are perfectionistic, that are overachieving, that are putting others before yourselves, that are people pleasing, right? Those behaviors are, again, to get external validation, but they eventually burn out.
Mm.
And the food comes in and says, I've got the hose, baby. I'm going to put that burn out. The burn is out of the perfectionism, for example. The food comes in, helps you put that burn out, but then there's a lot of shame around that
Yep.
behavior. And then we are back into that cycle. So it's a very long
Mm.
winded way. I should, that's actually the long story short.
I know. I was like, there's a lot more, I'm sure, to go down that path.
Yes.
But no, I like came from a history of binging, restricting, and I can
Mhm.
speak very, very closely and dearly to the shame that comes with binge eating
Yes.
and emotional eating. And
Mhm.
could definitely stem from a place, and that's still the something I lean towards whenever I'm emotional. I'm like, I'm not the person who like doesn't eat. I'm like, I
Yeah.
give me all the food as a coping mechanism. I have more awareness, heightened awareness around it now, and better control with that and finding the root.
Mhm.
But used to really struggle with it. And it would be things, relationally that would make that crop up and become worse, like not being
Mm.
happy in my work environment or in my relationship environment or whatever.
Mhm.
Do you find, because I know you work with a lot of more type A overachiever,
Oh, yeah.
professional women and things like that. Do you find you kind of answered it? Because I think you said that people swing back and forth, but do you find that they
Mhm.
fall in the better than or less than category more often than not? In those,
Yes. So I will see the less than, but
mm,
okay, I'm going to say yes and no because they
yeah,
might be better than in their careers,
yeah,
right? They can use that control, they can use that I've got it all together. I don't need you. I have so many surgeons, lawyers, judges that I work with. And to me, they say like, no, I'm doing that because I'm absolutely shitting my pants that I'm going to mess up. But on the facade, I don't need you. They won't ask for help. Right. So
hmm,
we have some of that better than this. And then deep down, though, that is a protective mechanism for the less thanness. So I want to kind of go back to what you said, if that's okay,
Yeah.
about your own experience. So that binging and restricting, right, is really, like you talked about the root cause. It's like, what is that covering up? Like, what is it that is trying to protect from you? And for a lot of the women I work with, it's feeling like a failure. Why?
Mhm.
I'm going to give a couple examples. Maybe they only received praise in their family when they got the A's or they scored the goal, right? Maybe they only received praise in their family when they were having emotions, but mom said, put a smile on, or walking into church. I don't know why it's always church, but we walk, put your smile on, and you're like, oh, you're being a good girl now. When you were having an emotion earlier, that was bad, right? So you don't learn to trust yourself. You might have received criticism, right, for not looking a certain way. You might have received criticism for getting the B instead of the A. And again, you learn about yourself. I'm only loved or seen or heard if X or Y, right? And that can feel, I mean, really, you feel like I can't be me and receive love and get my needs met. I have to be this instead. And that thing instead, perfectionism, looking a certain way, whatever that is, again, becomes so hard to manage because I mean, like restriction. Just think of restricting for your whole life.
Mm.
Like that's difficult, very difficult to do, almost impossible to do, right? And so that again burns out, and then the food is there to kind of help numb the burn. So,
Well, that's what I was about to ask, or your thoughts, because I was like, why is it so much? I feel like so often it's turning to, and especially a lot of the women that we're working with or talking to, but and myself personally, turning to food when we're feeling less than or criticized or whatever. Do you think that's because of it first starting with, like for me, it was first starting with the restriction, and that was okay, I need to change these things about myself, so I'm going to restrict, and then this is just the pendulum swinging to binging. Is that why it's going, you know,
mhm.
to food being the
Yeah,
emotional coping
there's
mechanism?
there's a couple of things there. So you had talked about it on a podcast, like if I'm eating good, I'm good,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so my worth comes from what I put in my mouth or what I don't. And so that becomes, again, exhausting because I'm trying to create a sense of self worth through this thing rather than internally. So the swing becomes, well, fuck this. I can't do this anymore. Or I had the food, and because I had the food, I'm now bad. So I swing, and that's where we see people kind of, well, I had the food, and they go into that all or nothing thinking. And the binge
Mm-hmm.
comes, and the weeks of not tracking or the weeks of eating poorly come, and then they say, okay, I'm going to be good now, and they've created again who they are and their worth and their character out of how they eat. The other thing I've seen recently is binging can be a sign of rebellion
Mm.
where you in your life have had to present perfectly, right? Whatever that is for you. I'm going to try to speak in broad terms, uh, and I'll give some examples if that's helpful, but
Yeah.
whatever perfect looks like for you. And I had this conversation with a client today where I'm like, she's done really well, but she's going back home and she hasn't been home in 2 years. And some of these behaviors are starting to creep up. And I had asked her that question and, like, that thought process of, well, I'm just going to, let go a little bit, or I'm just going, and hers is more around alcohol than it is food. But these old thought patterns are coming up for her. And she said the word rebellion. And I said, okay, what are we rebelling against? And she goes, oh, my calorie deficit. I go, no, let's go deeper than that. What are we rebelling against? And this idea of her family needing to see her a certain way. And before going to her trip, if she can kind of rebel and go against them, then maybe I get it out of my system. So then when I show up to them, I show up perfectly. I
Mm.
see it as rebellion as sometimes too. And
That
again,
makes a lot of sense.
it's not just the food. It look at your career. What does that look like? Look at your relationships. What is that like? Yourself as a parent. Like you're going to see these patterns in other areas of your life. In some of the areas, it's easier to moderate. But when it comes to food and diet culture, putting all of this in our ear, it really messes with us and it can become a bit more extreme.
Yeah. Oh yeah. The extremes are oof, something.
Yeah.
And I like, and I know for me with food, um, it was, if anything, like emotional coping mechanism. Like, for like, I don't know if it's most the way I was raised or American culture, but like also just associating it with like the pleasure side of things.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not happy in my work situation. I'm not happy, just broke up with my boyfriend. I'm not happy, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Food will make me happy. And so it was
Mm-hmm.
also that like bond to food.
Right. Um, let's just think about parents, right? How many times is it like, if you're a good girl, I'll give you a popsicle?
Yeah.
They don't call them sad meals. They're called happy meals. Like,
Yeah.
and you always got a happy meal when you did something good.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or like I has mentioned, like I'm half Hispanic, half Italian, and like food is a part of the culture. Like that's where yes, we're laughing and people are coming together. So I want people to know that there is an emotional connection to food, right? And I think that sometimes we think that's not okay. So when we do get in front of it, it's this large amount as if, okay, we're just going to have this emotional connection now, or I would say, indulgence, right? I'm going to have all this indulgence now. And then that way later I can be good. But there is a
Mhm.
part of it too that it provides a dopamine hit, whether that's because you've related it with all these positive things in the past, or simply, those high sugary foods, they do provide pleasure in the body. So we're getting that dopamine. We're having a false sense of like happiness or calmness. And being calm in our body is something we need to learn to do in ourselves. But again, going back to early childhood development, we've not learned that. So
Mm.
food's so easy. It's right there. And again, if we're conditioned in childhood, like when I'm good, this I get this thing and it makes me feel even better. Well, then that might help too when I'm really sad or I'm really angry or stressed out. So there's a lot of
So,
different
so
spider
true.
webs.
Could you give some more examples too of just like ways that maybe emotional needs aren't met in, because we kind of touched on like
Mm-hmm.
maybe traumas from childhood, but like, like I'm just thinking of the woman listening to this right now who doesn't know why she's like so, has such a binge restrict or emotional relationship with food, and maybe some ways, some root things that could be going on where her emotional needs aren't met in her relationships.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, I'm I have a form that I have all my clients walk through. It's one of the first things that I do. And I ask them these questions. I'm going to ask your listeners. Did you navigate childhood with a parent who struggles to regulate their own emotions? Right.
Mm.
So
Oof.
I did.
Yeah.
Um, my mom's mom passed away when I was very young. And there was a lot of things that happened in that time. And she went through her own grieving process. And she didn't have the skills or the therapy or any of that because that honestly wasn't even, I mean, it was available to people, but it wasn't as, um, as common as it is now. So when I was, when she was having these emotions, they were big and they were scary and they were hurtful. Right. And so I'm looking at this person who's supposed to teach me, and she's teaching me that we only show big emotions that are anger and big bouts of depression, right? So that's my example. You might have a parent who dismisses your reality. So when I
Mm.
say, I use this example, and this isn't necessarily early childhood development, but you and I both have probably gone through breakups when we were like, 13 in middle school, and it was horrible to us, right? It is absolutely terrible. It's the worst thing in the world. And parents are like, it's not a big deal. Like, you'll get over
You'll be
it. Like,
fine.
right. And that's an example later on in life that kind of, oh, why are you crying? You don't need to be crying right now. Or, I'll give you something to cry about. Or, I'm scared, mommy. Oh, there's, no need to be scared, rather than being like, okay, you're scared. Like, what's scary right now? And
Mm.
kind of helping them walk through that. You dismiss their reality or their wants, even food. This is a big one too, where I'm still hungry, right? And maybe the parent's like, no, you're not getting any more to eat, or I'm full. And they're like, no, you need to eat more, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's even dismissing your reality. The next one is the parents who kind of overlooks your presence. So the whole idea of children should be seen, not heard, right?
Mm.
And you're just kind of this, your job is to just sit there, be quiet, not have an opinion, not talk, this kind of, as I call, lost child. You have a parent who attempts to live vicariously through you. I also experienced this where my mom was really happy when I was performing. That's a lot of what she would like brag about to her friends is my performance and my dance, and make me like a little doll dance for people, right?
Yeah.
And I love
Mm.
doing it. I mean, listen, I like
Yeah.
the stage. It's not a stage I've met that I don't like. However, as I look at it now, I'm like, oh wow, like she was finding a sense of self-worth through me. And that
Yeah.
sense of I am here to please other people became a thing, right? The other few is obviously a parent who excessively fixates on your outward appearance. And that doesn't necessarily just mean how you look, but we as a family are the Joneses. We are always dressed to the nine. There is no problem here. All the kids are good kids, so on and so forth. That's not reality. That's not
Mhm.
reality. And you're going to have emotions and struggles and all of these things. But if we're just kind of, how old are you?
I'm 32 at the time
Okay.
of recording.
Yay. So I'm 42, and there was a Black Hole Sun is a music video back in the day, and all these people had these like fake smiles. That's what I think of when I think of the parent who's like, no, we just put a smile on and everything's fine, right?
Yep. Yep.
Um, then the last one's again a parent who didn't provide healthy boundaries. Maybe you came from a
Mm.
family where parents were divorcing, and your parent, one of the two, kind of turned to you as their girlfriend, like as their friend, right? And you were this, hearing about the other parent or their
Mhm.
dating life or whatever that looks like. Poor boundaries is going through your stuff, right? There is a sense of privacy at a certain age that children are privy to or should be privy to or are allowed to have, especially as they get older. A lack of boundaries could also be you're the eldest of a group of or a group, excuse me, of maybe a large family, and you're put into a position to take care of the others when you still need to be taking care of yourself. But now you're in this leadership position without the education to do it, then something bad happens, you're shamed for it, right? And
Mhm.
so this boundary system is a mess. And as I had mentioned, the others, addiction is a big one as well.
Mhm.
Addiction really does cause a lot of damage to families. The child feels like the addiction itself is more important than them. Now they don't know that in the moment, but
Mhm.
if and they oftentimes tend to mask who they are. They're very good at being chameleons in regards to, well, if daddy comes through the door shuffling his feet, I need to act this way. But if daddy comes through the door picking up his feet, I can be myself, right?
Mm.
Or maybe if I'm just this good enough, smart enough, get the grades or the maybe even like being a good athlete, then maybe mommy or daddy will stop drinking. So those are
Mm.
some examples.
Have you heard Ed Milet's story?
Okay. I
Okay.
was literally going to bring that up. Wait, were you at the freaking
I was
where
at
he
Coaching
spoke?
Con. Were you
Me
at Coaching?
too.
Okay, yeah, I knew we had
Yes.
crossed
The
paths.
key.
You're what?
The key where he said I could hear
Yes,
if
yes.
my dad was drunk or not when the key came, like when it came through the door. That's funny. When I was saying that, I was thinking about him in my head.
I was thinking that too. So, well, for anyone who hasn't heard that, his dad was alcoholic, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he could literally, as a kid, hear like how he was shuffling to get the key in the door or not, and knew whether he needed to like get his other siblings away. I
Mm-hmm.
forget the
Yeah.
details, like get his other siblings
He
in
had
another
like
room or
a set
something.
of skills that he did when dad shuffled with the key versus if dad didn't.
Yeah. Oh, so sad. And God
Yeah.
bless eldest children too for being the lead. I feel like that leadership role oftentimes gets assumed. And
Mm-hmm.
and I'm the youngest of three, so I'm like,
Me too.
Love my position as the youngest. It's great.
Yes.
But also giving, and I'm sure you probably would say this too. You mentioned something like there's just so much more information now. Like I actually
Mhm.
feel for like, the boomers and generations older than that, because there is just more information about how you can't even raise your same kids the same way. Like you
Right.
have to adopt, like learn their personality and what works with them.
Oh, absolutely.
Just so much information that was not available, you know,
Mhm. Yeah,
30,
it
40 years ago.
is right. And, again, I talk a lot, and a lot of my mentors talk a lot about the early childhood relationship. But what we're not doing is like shaming those parents.
Yeah.
They knew what they knew and they did their best with what they had, right? Unless there is obvious, abuse.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
majority of the
Absolutely.
people that, yeah, I work with, they knew what they knew and they did the best they could. And so it's not a shame fest. Like, don't listen to this podcast. Call mom and cuss her out, please. Just just learn from it.
Just learn from it.
Yes.
Well, and I wanted to touch on one thing you said too of like the not dismissing someone. It's actually something I'm thinking about being. I have one baby in heaven. I'm about to have my first
Mhm.
here on
Oh,
earth,
your
but I'm
rainbow
like
baby.
I
Mhm.
so obviously more and more parenting things coming to mind of like, oh, I want to do it like this. I want to not do it like this, right?
Mhm.
But saw something, it was probably on Facebook, I don't know, a post that was like of a dad's response to his daughter, 3 years old, whatever, falling down and hitting her knee. And his wife was just saying his response was, oh, I saw you fell down. Like, are you okay? Or just, I just saw you fell down. It wasn't, she was like, he could have responded in like, oh my gosh, are you okay?
Right.
Or he could
Mhm.
have said like, you're fine, brush it off. And that's probably the way I would naturally lean as a parent, to be more like, you're good, rub some dirt in it, let's go.
Right.
But I'm like, I don't want to diminish what they are, feeling, but I
Mhm.
also don't want to project onto them like my worry, my concern. Anyway, I was like, that's such a
Absolutely.
good, I was like, oh, that's the person I
I
want to be,
love
is
that.
like, hey, how are you feeling with
Mhm.
this?
It's almost just like observing.
Yeah.
I see you're getting tense right now, or I see tears in your eyes, or I see you fell down, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And just, this is my observation, and then allow them the space to speak.
So
And
good.
then if we need to teach them something on, like, obviously validate, like, okay, I hear that you feel that way. One of the things I do with what I used to do with the kids is like help them name feelings through colors. So what color do I feel? What does that feel like in your body? What do you think that color needs right now?
Mm,
And what do you think you need right now? Okay, I need a hug. Great. Provide them the hug. Now there's a difference between emotions and behaviors, obviously. If we're kicking and doing all the things, and we need to acknowledge the behavior, but those are two separate things,
yeah.
right? And that's hard. The more that we learn about raising emotionally mature and healthy kids, there's literally like just like these onion layers that come to it, and eventually you'll learn how that works for you. And here's the thing for parents, and you soon being a parent, one of the best things you can do is say, you know what, mama needs a redo. I didn't do that right.
Yeah.
you know,
I
and
know.
recognizing there's no perfection in the process of parenting, nor even, emoting and like having emotion.
Yeah, I was like, God bless parents. I was like, I'm already accepting the fact that I will probably create some little T trauma for my kids, as much as I am trying not to, because I
Mm-hmm.
am, I have my own big T, little T's, and I am
Yeah,
learning, so it's like,
right.
yeah, I think so much grace for like the, hey, mom needs to redo that.
Right. Well, if we just kind of bring this full circle, it's like the binge and restrict cycle. If someone's really working on reducing binge eating, right, they're going to have moments where they overeat without that intention that they set for themselves, or they're not connected to their bodies, and that's a part of the process.
Yeah.
But what's really important there is not that the behavior happened, but what do I do? So again, going back to, it's the story I tell myself about that behavior. So when things might happen with your kiddos, and some of those little T things come up, but that kiddo, if they learn the skills and they know, like, this is not about me, this was mom, she
Mm,
took accountability for herself, I have the skills to like manage my own emotions, they're going to be okay, right? And obviously
yeah.
that looks very different at different ages. But the same with the woman who is struggling with the binge and restrict cycle, like I tell my clients, like, I expect for this to come up again multiple times through this process. It's how we respond to it that is more important than the behavior itself.
Oh,
Because
so good.
yeah, because the response usually is that shame and guilt. Because remember that cycle we talked about. If I can help change that, like this binge means nothing about who I am. I, allowed this part of me to kind of take over. As I say to my clients, that part, the binge part of you is in the driver's seat. Let's get curious to why. Have compassion for it because it's there to protect you from
Mhm.
whatever it is. Let's get curious to what it is and then understand and move on.
I was literally about to ask you, but I think that was the answer of like, how does someone get out of the binge restrict cycle? And is it really just like your thoughts around the event and your perception and how you speak to
Mhm.
yourself around
Yeah.
the event?
Yes, absolutely. And I think, again, just thinking about it. So, the IFS theory that I've been really educating myself on is I don't say the founder, the creators. His name is Dick Schwartz. He was recently on Huberman, if anyone wants to listen to that recent
Cool.
episode. And it's this idea that we have these three parts to us. And I think this will help answer that question. I've kind of touched on it. So you have your exiles, those are your wounded parts, right? So they're not good enough, good enough, shame, all the things. And we try to exile them because they're so overwhelming that we need to push them away. We have our managers, which protect us, right? And our managers, again, as I've already touched on, are your people pleasing, perfectionism, all of that, right? And then the binge eating is the firefighter to put out the burnout from the manager because the manager eventually
Mm,
gets burnt out. And the binge eating is the solution to this, mindset. If I'm good enough in these ways, then I'm worthy. Right.
mm,
So I want to just reiterate that for these few reasons. We can look at that binge as a solution, as something that helped protect us, as something that got our needs met, whether that was just to calm the fuck down, right? As kids or now. When we can look at it with like a sense of appreciation and compassion, that's a totally different conversation with ourselves than your piece of shit. Sorry,
yeah.
can I cuss on this podcast?
Yeah. We try to keep it clean, but we also
Okay,
have some
sorry.
some F-bombs sometimes. So it's
Okay.
okay.
I cuss a lot. So, okay, I will work on it.
You're good.
I'm a terrible human. Like, I'm disgusting, right? That's a different conversation
Yeah.
than, okay, I know that this behavior is here because I allowed another thing to get out of control, right? I was putting restricting can be labeled as perfection,
Yeah.
right?
Oh, totally.
I'm perfect in this. Look how good I'm eating. I'm doing so well. I'm on track. And then that one thing happens, right? And then we make up about ourselves, that exile part of us, all of that shame and guilt kind of rears its ugly head. The binge says, nope, not today, shuts that exile down by binge eating. And so to answer your question, it's looking at this behavior from a sense of compassion and curiosity and being able, again, we have to understand why it's there because you're not just going to listen to this. Maybe you do. Maybe you listen to this podcast and be like, oh, wow, like my binging is actually a solution to my fact that I put everyone else before myself. My needs are never met. So the binge comes in and says, here, I'll meet your needs today. Right.
Hmm.
But really helping people understand like it's not this like problem that they have or lack of willpower, discipline. It's much bigger than that. And when we can put those puzzle pieces together and kind of say, no, this is actually something you've learned over time. And because you've learned it, we can unlearn it.
So good. That is
Yeah.
so good. And I like have never thought like that far about it, like the restriction part, which is probably a large majority of people listening to this have struggled with the restriction or restrict binge or a combination. But being a
Mhm.
perfectionist or that manager,
Yes.
dynamic. And that is so true. Like, I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
yep, that's it. That's it.
It's It's such a like beautiful theory in the way that they explain it, because before in my program we have I have a whole psychological curriculum, and one of the reflections, as I call them, was on the inner critic, right? And we only talked about the inner critic. But when I started learning about these, it's called parts, like he calls it like parts work, is that, well, that inner critic can be for mine. I have an inner critic or a part of myself that is like uber independent, doesn't ask for help. I have a part that is validates the fact that I don't need help, but those are two different things, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so the way that they explain it is like, it's not just like, there's the good part of my brain and the bad part of my brain. It's like, no, there's like all these characters in your mind, which
Yeah.
sounds very like multiple
Schizophrenic.
personality. It's not,
Yeah.
you know, it's very interesting. But I've definitely, if people are interested in listening to that Huberman, that's a good one.
Yeah. What was it?
Richard
Who was it?
Schwartz.
Okay.
Uh, Richard Schwartz or Dick Schwartz. He goes
Okay.
by both names.
Okay. I know some people listen to this podcast, listen to the Andrew Huberman podcast. So there
Mm-hmm.
you go, guys. That's for you.
There you go.
There you
Yeah.
go. Well, and like kind of in tandem with this, I know we're kind of coming up on time here too, but
Are we?
same, but different, but different. Okay. As long as you can go, we can go.
Let's roll.
But like in the same vein for women, listening to this, like, another topic that we had discussed chatting about is like, you mentioned, you call it toxic resilience in
Mhm.
relationships. And that being how women, they're basically taught to endure crappy relationships instead of
Yes.
leaving them. And then this, I feel like, is in tandem with the emotional eating conversation and not getting your needs met in relationships. But like, can you speak more to what you mean by toxic resilience and like how that shows up and presents
Yes.
for women?
Absolutely. And toxic resilience is a term that I use for not just, in relationships, it can be in your career and all the things, but it's kind of in
Mm,
this mindset that I'm just going to push through. I'm not going to listen to myself, and I'll basically sleep when I'm dead. And women, because we have many, most socially more responsibilities. We have to take care of the children, the home. Now we have working, women. We have to, obviously pay attention to our relationship. That's probably important. So we have all these things that we're doing, and we really lack boundaries and the ability to, listen to our bodies and listen to our stress levels and listen to ourselves. And if we just can achieve more, then we, in our minds, create this idea that that's where we'll find the relaxation, or that's where we'll find the peace, but it's never enough, right? It's like an abusive relationship with doing.
mm,
And in relationships themselves, you had mentioned where we will literally endure so much before we're done. And again, just going back to like where that comes from, you know, if you have a parent that you've always tried to get them to show you, that they accept you or they love you, but they were doing it through verbal abuse, emotional abuse, what I call withholding love, like the silent treatment. That's not
mm,
great. Obviously, criticism, or even vicarious, kind of hearing them talk about other people.
mm,
And then you being like, well, I don't want them to talk about me that way. Right. So you're constantly enduring this abuse, and you find that to be familiar. Okay. So I don't tell people, when people binge eat, for example, I say it's not a failure, it's familiar.
mm-hmm,
And the familiarity is what our brains are used to, right? We're used to high stress and chaos or unpredictability. We're used to even fear, and like we're constantly in that, fight, flight, freeze, or please state of mind. And our brains literally will change the way that they respond. So, your different, hopefully you can cut this. Your
You're good.
norepinephrine, epinephrine, all your stress hormones. There it is.
Yeah,
Ding.
there you go. We
All your
got there.
stress hormones like will get out of whack, and like you become emotionally addicted to the high stress and the unpredictability and all
Yeah.
of those things. And so fast forward, if that's all we know, we will naturally attract that to ourselves because we don't know anything different. And I will say this, if we do get in a relationship with someone who is maybe in a emotionally mature place, that when we are our familiar is high stress, unpredictability, endure as much as possible, that person who's healthy is going to feel boring. He's too
Mhm.
nice or she's
Yeah.
too nice. They're vanilla. It's just not exciting. You're laughing.
Yeah, because it's so true. Well,
Yes.
and like the familiar of like just like also in line with the fitness, conversation or what, a lot of people listening to this are here for that too. But like also the familiar of, I was just talking with the other Christina that we just
Mhm.
interviewed. But she was saying how, like we were talking about backing off of like such intense workouts and killing yourself in
Yes.
your body, but it's so familiar for women. Like, and we love that high stress and that high cortisol and that like, you know, up here level is just
Yes.
familiar, but it's not like best for us. It's like toxic
Right. Well, if
resilience.
we think about that, there's so many aspects to that we've talked about today. So you obviously are familiar with the high stress, as they call it, the cortisol junkies.
Yep.
And so why? Like we almost wear that as a badge of honor sometimes. It's
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
until you get your hormone panel and you're like, shoot. Um, and then also that better than side of
Yeah.
you. Like, oh, look what I can do. And listen, I've been that girl who worked out 6, 7 days a week at 45 in the morning and then went to the gym in the afternoon, eating 12 to 1300 calories. And I was lean, but I was an absolute disaster internally.
Mm.
There were so many things that were affecting my mental health, even just the idea of I've got to keep this up now because I have, visible abs and like people are making comments and all of
Mm-hmm.
that. I've also got to keep this up in my, I tore my labrum. Well, I
Oof.
was a dancer, so I already had some issues, but I tore my labrum at the time. And then like my body was almost like, well, if you're not going to rest, I'm going to rest for you. Right. So I had these
Yeah.
physical ailments that happened and so much more. But for the people listening, like it's that I have lived in such a high stress body that all I know is intensity. So I, punish my body into the ground. But also societally, we say, well, look at you, look what you can do. Tell me how to be like you. So there's this
Mm-hmm.
better thanness that we get from it too. And
Badge
that's
of honor.
yeah,
Yeah.
I've been there and I've had to work through it. Um,
Now, now
so
I'm like want to swing to the other side or like balance out to the other side where I'm like actually just talking with a girlfriend. She was called me or she was like, "Hey, can we talk for like just some business advice stuff?" And she's like, "I know you run a business. I will pay you. Like I know your time is valuable. You're busy." I was like, "First of all, you're a friend. Please don't offend me by saying that you need to pay me or that I'm too busy." I was like, "I don't want to wear like that is
mm,
not my badge of honor." Like if
oh, I love
anything,
that.
I was like, I like when someone starts out the conversation by saying like I know you're busy, I'm like no 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 I'm not for you,
Hmm.
like that. I'm like, oh, I hate that if people feel that way. It's like that's
Right.
something in my mind. I'm like, I don't want to be so familiar with go go go, and as the type A
Hmm.
overachievers that we
Hmm.
are, and a lot of the women listening to this can probably relate, but it's like that might be our familiar, but not
Hmm.
the best.
Right. It's not who we want to be. And
Yeah.
you don't know that until you realize like that I'm much more than that.
Yeah.
Right. But again,
Yes.
we don't know that until we figure it out. Like you
Yeah.
are so much more. You're a good friend. Right. And being a good friend is even if I was busy, I don't want you to think that I don't have the time for you.
Yeah.
And also, the therapist in me has to say this, but also setting the boundaries when you don't have maybe the mental capacity for that person. And
Yeah.
my friends and I have a few really close friends where we literally ask, and it sounds like she did too, of like, hey, need to vent. Do you have the bandwidth?
Yeah, yeah.
Yes or no, but being a good friend is obviously much more valuable or something you value more than, that work ethic and grind. But I'm
Yep.
guessing you had to learn that too.
Yeah, yeah. I'm like definitely have learned to be not always a yes girl. Sometimes I'm a
Yeah.
no girl.
Yes. Complete sentence. No.
No.
Yes.
But yeah, so like other ways like toxic resilience, like so in relationships, and then also, I mean, you had mentioned it can show up in other ways too. Like I think of like toxic resilience. You think you said workplace, so like the golden hair
Mhm.
handcuffs. Would that be kind of be like a toxic
Absolutely.
resilience
Yes.
thing?
So, especially for women, they're, women in these male dominated fields, they already
Mhm.
feel like that there's only certain amount of, business or success that they can have. And so they will grind, they'll work the long hours, they will say yes, they'll work on weekends, they will do all of the things. When, Frank is off by 3 going to golf, he does that every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and Frank seems to be just as successful as Sally. But there's that mindset of like, no, I need to do more, be more, or I'm going to lose my seat at this table. And
Mhm.
unfortunately, with how society has been, that has kind of been true, but we are seeing a shift in more
Mhm.
companies that are female led, and um, women in their, as both of us starting their own businesses. And so what comes with that, if we are leading the way when it comes to women who are in these leadership positions, is to ensure that you are leading in a way that doesn't mimic the past and doesn't mimic that behavior. And a lot of the women I work with are in these leadership positions, and teaching them boundaries, teaching them self-care, figuring out, when we are, even just figuring out your body, like, oh, I don't need to work out today, I need to rest, right?
Mm. Mhm.
I'm actually going to go to or not actually going, hopefully you're already going to your kid's birthday, but I'm going to have the cake with my son because that's a memory I want to have. And
Yeah.
any person, whether you're a coach, you're a business owner, you're an executive, it all starts with you, right? And
Mhm.
learning how to find a boundary system that works for you, because toxic resilience is that very boundaryless person. And they just go and go and go. And it's always at the expense of yourself, right?
Mm.
Always
Yep.
at the expense of yourself. And being able to figure out why and get curious to that.
Well, and that's what was my next question for you, was like for the person who is stuck in and they're like, yep, that's me, toxicity.
Yep.
I'm stuck in that toxic relationship or toxic work environment. I actually also heard, gosh, I can't remember her name, a therapist who's popping up a lot on social media right now, talking about how like we've created a very weak society in a lot of ways with
Mm-hmm.
like as far as like creating making labels our identity instead of labeling what an emotion is and figuring it out. It's like,
Mm.
like, and things like that. And then also
Oh, yeah.
how
That's why
also
I
how
left
like
therapy.
also how having like a toxic work environment, like not everyone is a narcissist. Like you're gonna come across tough people, and like learning how to deal with that stuff. So there's that side of things. But then like what would you say to someone who's like, I can't just go quit my job or I can't just go like it's not like I'm a single mom of 4 and my husband's the breadwinner. I can't just go like I don't know if maybe a part of that is boundaries, it sounds like. But if you would
Yes.
just like share some tips for them who are like, I can't just go like re, you know,
Yeah.
remake
See
my
ya.
life right
Yeah.
now, but how can they what can they do?
Yes. I'm going to give you guys a little something that I teach all my clients. And I hope that this is a good little chunk of knowledge that you're like, I can do that. Okay.
Good, good,
So
good.
I'm going to use the words um, help. Okay. So you can interchange help with say yes, caretake, help someone. So there's 4 steps here. So we only help or say yes or take on the project if that person can't do it themselves. Okay. So number 1, we only help, say yes, take on the project if the person asked us directly.
Hmm.
Okay. Because how many women are like, oh, I'll do that for you.
Yeah.
They didn't ask you.
Yeah.
Okay.
So true.
Or Frank wants to go golf and he's asking you to do the thing that he needs to be doing instead of golfing. And you say yes. No, we don't. We don't do that anymore because Frank can do it himself. Okay.
We don't do that anymore.
No, we don't, ladies. Number 3. Number 3. We don't say yes, take on the project or help if we're expecting something in return. Oh, then
Oh,
maybe they'll help me. Maybe they'll love me more.
oof.
Okay. These next the last two are the doozies. This is the biggest one. We don't say yes, take on the project, help if we know we will feel negatively afterwards.
Mm.
Because that's me. That was me, where I'd be like, yes, yes, yes. And then I'd be like, why is my day so crazy? Like, why do I feel like shit? Why do I come home and scream at my poor husband because I've said yes to too many things when I
Yeah.
know I have this false confidence that I can do all of this stuff and it's at the expense of myself all the time, every single time. So now I just
Uh,
say no all the time.
no, I just say no all the time. You
Yeah,
know, period.
just kidding. Is that helpful though? Like those
Yeah, oh,
rules?
so good. And I was actually just having a conversation literally this morning with a person very close to me who will go nameless because she is listens to this podcast, and for privacy reasons. But anyway, the one where like I will not say yes, to what was, oh my gosh, what did you say?
Expecting something in return.
Expecting something in return.
Mm-hmm.
And because she's very much the caretaker person, and she feels like she was always giving, and then when she needs something, those close friends and family, it's not returned. And so I'm
Yep.
like, you probably need to say no more often too,
Mm-hmm.
especially if
Yes.
you're saying yes because you're like, it's like looking for that like emotional support or validation in return, and like
Mm-hmm.
the people pleasing side.
Yeah.
I was like, well, yeah.
Yeah, and
So
just I am someone who loves to throw parties for my friends and I go all out and like I will do these big themes and I also have to plan my own birthday and then I get upset by that. But I'm like, nobody's like me. I think they're probably more like, well, you do this big old thing. Like, we can't do what you do. Like, we're not even interested in doing what you do. But then I'm
yeah.
like, why doesn't anyone plan my birthday? I'm like, well, I'm kind of setting them up for failure too.
Yeah.
But I do
Yeah.
have that boundary. Like I know I do it this way, but like, can you someone just get a reservation somewhere?
Yeah.
Like that's all I'm
Just
expecting.
reserve dinner reservation somewhere,
Yes,
please. Like,
come on.
gosh.
I
But
don't
you
need to
do,
be the one doing
you
it.
set the bar high for,
Yeah.
for awesome parties. So,
Yes. They are fabulous. So I get it though. No, and
oh, so
those
good.
guidelines are so helpful, right?
Yeah.
So helpful.
Yeah.
Even in and I'll say in relationship, the help someone, the first two can get a little bit muddy, right? If they don't ask you directly because you want to surprise them, right? Or they
Mhm.
can do it themselves. Um, but in my relationship, people kind of look at us and are like, wait, you've never done your husband's laundry? I'm like, mm-mm.
Yeah.
I've never touched his laundry, right? We have
Me
like
either.
very clear boundary. It's crazy, like and we have things we do together, but we're very big on like directly, like, can you help me with this? And if we're not asking, that means we don't need each other's help. It's
Yeah.
very clear, but in relationships, those first two can get a little wonky, but the last two need to stay in place, especially in relationships,
Yeah.
because
Yeah. Because I'd
that's where it can
imagine,
get
like,
muddy.
with the not being asked, there's things that you guys, like, if you're coming in with arms full of groceries, he's just going to help. You don't have to
Right.
ask for him to
Right.
help. Or, yeah, like those situations. But, like, you're pretty straightforward. When you need help, you ask for help,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
vice versa. So good. So, like, so many people are coming to mind right now. I'm like, we're going to send this off, ping this off.
Yes. Pop off.
Pop off. Well,
Yes.
thank you so much for your time today. Is there anything else that you would add or anything that we didn't touch on in that conversation? Like, I feel like we hit on a
No,
lot.
I feel like I know it's a lot of information.
Yeah.
Really at the end of the day, it's like, okay, our beliefs dictate our behaviors, our behaviors dictate our outcomes, and those outcomes are either going to make us feel good or bad. So if we're seeing a lot of the same outcomes, we can kind of play it backwards. What are the behaviors that create those outcomes? And what are my beliefs about myself? And
Mm,
really, if those beliefs are really deep seated and deep rooted, maybe that's the time to go seek, therapy or self help or coaching, whatever that looks like.
so good. So good. Amazing. So much knowledge.
This
Probably
is
gonna have to
fun.
play this back again.
Yes.
Well, where can everyone find you? What's the best way to connect with you?
Best way to connect with me, you can find me at mindsetofmatter.com. That's our website. All of our information is on there. Also on YouTube and Instagram and TikTok at Mindset of Matter Coaching. If you want to add another podcast into the list, we have the Mindset Mirror Connection, which is my whole health coaching podcast, as well as Dating Deja Vu, which is all about, is it deja vu or is it you? And figuring it out together.
Oh my gosh, I love that.
It's so good. It's kind of like my little like fun little thing that I do on the side.
I cannot wait for the lib episodes. So good.
Yes, I will.
So good.
Yes, I have to. I'm going to make note. I need to do that.
Yes.
It's like, I should have done it last week. Cause we know, like, when it comes to reality or any sort of pop culture, like the sooner you drop, the better. But I had these others already that I wanted to, it's just a lot. Cause I watch a lot of reality TV. Like,
well, it sounds like you watch a lot of reality TV and do a lot of podcast recording. So, there's only but so much time in the day.
Listen, habit stack. Isn't that what we call it?
Yeah, that's right.